Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm welcome to this 3:30 session of the RTPI Enforcement Conference for NAPE, and I'm very glad to once again be chairing today. I chaired a session yesterday, and maybe some of you, and we have a huge number today actually, maybe some of you have come back again for more. So the session today, I should tell you first of all that my name is Janet Askew. I'm a past president of the Royal Town Planning Institute and a big supporter of enforcement. And I've been lucky enough to speak at quite a few of your enforcement conferences. And I'm very pleased indeed to be able to still take part, because I think enforcement is the key to good planning. Now then, today's a little bit different because we're always talking about new technology. And when I first read it was about drones, as I've said already to our speaker, I assumed it was about the illegal use of drones by other people. And I then discovered, when I've now read what he's going to tell us about, that it's actually about the use of drones by enforcement officers as a new tool, if you like, in our box of planning tools. So I would like to introduce our speaker, who is a planning enforcement officer with Sandwell Council in the West Midlands, I think, yeah. And Ervin Hoxha has been there since 2013 and dealt with all sorts of planning enforcement work. But most interesting of all is that he has become something called a drone pilot, which sounds very exciting to me. He's also managed a lot of unauthorised travellers encampments on council-owned land, and he has looked at has long experience in housing, antisocial behaviour, and also as a police officer, as a special constable. So I think that this is a very interesting background to be an enforcement officer, and I think it's very exciting that enforcement is moving maybe to a new technological kind of future. And let's hear from Ervin now, from him for half an hour. Can I just say that you will be invited at the end of Ervin's talk to give some make questions if you like. You can't speak them, as you probably know, but you'll be given a chance to write the questions to me. So let's carry on now. Over to Ervin, and thank you very much, Ervin, for coming today for us. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you can see the presentation on the screen. My name is Ervin Hoxha. I'm a planning enforcement officer with Sandwell Metropolitan Borough Council, and obviously been working as a planning enforcement officer since 2013. And I've been a qualified commercial drone operator since 2018 under the name of the Sandwell Council. These are my contact details, which will be available to the organizers to share with anyone that would like a copy of the presentation. The use of drones for commercial operations. The use of drones by local authorities, which is also referred to as unauthorized aircraft systems or small unmanned aircraft for planning enforcement purposes, has unlocked additional opportunities to investigate breaches of planning control. Drones are a very safe means of surveying large sites, specific areas where planning breaches may have taken place, such as development to the rear of properties, or sites which present a risk to officer safety, such as untidy land. In addition to the above, local authorities should ensure robust data protection policies are put in place and complied with. Data protection impact assessments for these activities would be beneficial to ensure compliance is achieved. The commercial use of drones is also subject to extensive regulation from the Civil Aviation Authority. While some local authorities are registered as drone operators, the compliance requirements mean that planning enforcement officers are likely to need to engage their authority's specialist drone team or a commercial provider if drone footage or images are required. Talking about the definition of commercial operations, the drone operator for the local authority must have the permission from the Civil Aviation Authority to carry out commercial operations, known as Permission for Commercial Operations, otherwise abbreviated as PFCO. and have an operations manual which does explain the local authorities' process on operating and managing the drone and all its qualified drone pilots. Permissions and/or exemptions are valid for up to 12 months and are subject to a payable annual renewal fee. The term commercial operations allows a broad variety of flight applications which are mostly based around aerial photography or the operation of sensors and other data gathering devices. The key elements in understanding this term are any flight by a small unmanned aircraft in return for remuneration or other valuable consideration. Commercial drones availability. There are many different drone brands used commercially, such as DJI, Unique, and Helios, which are amongst the few that I could mention in this presentation. The drones do vary in size, price, capabilities, and additional equipment that can be attached to them. For example, thermal imaging cameras, face recognition cameras, high-resolution cameras, and strobe or flashlights, etc. Depending on the make, the model, and additional equipment or attachments, the price range for drones can vary from as little as £1,000 to as much as £15,000 to £20,000. In this slide, you can see pictures of different drones. Obviously, most of the drones in this slide are from the well-known brand DJI. I'm not promoting any of those, but it's because in Sandwell Council, the brand DJI Mavic Pro, which is on the top left-hand corner of the screen, is what we use, which is a portable drone. Then you have the other drones that probably some of you may have seen or probably are in possession of one. These are the drones that are widely used commercially by many private companies and local authorities and law enforcement agencies. Liability insurance for the drone. European regulation from 2004 came into force, requiring most operators of aircraft, irrespective of the purposes for which they fly, to hold adequate levels of insurance in order to meet their liabilities in the event of an accident. UK legislation, which details insurance requirements, is set out in the Civil Aviation Insurance Regulations 2005. Within planning, the drones offer fantastic opportunities for other teams such as regeneration service, planning policy, highways, transportation planning, as well as building control. The drone can be used to survey regeneration sites, obtain progress updates from sites under development, highway improvements, as well as survey of dangerous structures or untidy land. The use of drones offer a unique source of information which has been widely adopted by law enforcement agencies throughout the UK, meaning all the police forces within the UK, search and rescue teams, local authorities, plenty of universities, many football clubs, and many drone enthusiasts who have turned the use of drones into a business. Local planning authorities need to assess if the use of drones is necessary to gather the required information to establish the planning bridge, and if such information can be gathered by any other means, such as site visits and direct contact with the owner or occupier. Flying the drone obviously is the easy part. Most of the drones are so highly advanced technologically that it doesn't need much effort to fly. Most of the work goes into the pre-flight preparation, making the necessary checks to ensure the flight is carried out safely, as well as preparing in case of an unfortunate accident. What are the issues to consider before the flight? Obviously, pre-flight checks, where you check the weather forecasts. You check about any flight restrictions placed within the area that you intend to fly the drone. You'd need to establish permission from the landlord. Without their consent, you would be flying the drone illegally. You need to communicate or to notify adjoining property owners of such drone survey, as well as provide a contact should they need to discuss any concerns they may have with you. You may need to consider notifying the local police in case residents report the sighting of the drone as illegal activity. You don't want the police to come over to you and say, by the way, you're flying the drone illegally. If the drone survey would take place within a flight restricted zone, flight restricted zones are military bases and all airports. Before you fly the drone within that area, you would need to check with air traffic control about your drone being flown in that restricted area. Within Sandwell Council, we are in the process of renewing the insurance and the registration as a commercial drone operator. And as I mentioned a bit earlier, the drone we use is a DJI Mavic Pro. The drone is mostly used for inspections of untidy land and dangerous buildings in association with the building control team, for roof surveys, progress updates on large sites under development, council-owned land surveys, and highway improvement updates. So far, we have not had to use the drone for unauthorized development, as we have managed to successfully access all sites. However, the drone has been used twice on untidy properties, which are also considered as dangerous structures by the council's building control team. The images on the slide show the use of the drone by myself. I'll start with the image number 1. That was a long-standing untidy property. That was a pub near the football station, a football stadium in the town of West Bromwich. It then later transpired that the building was becoming dangerous, and the building control team was interested to inspect the extent of the damages to the building for the purpose of obtaining access rights to the property, or the right of entry. The image number 2 is a dwelling house, again a long-standing untidy property and land, and that was also being considered as a dangerous building by the building control team. Jointly, we did this drone survey to find out the extent of the damage on the roof. Image number 3 is a large site that was under development as part of regeneration scheme from Sandwell Council, and this was a progress update required by regeneration team for marketing and for other purposes for their team. Image number 4 and number 5 relate to the same site for highway improvements by the planning regeneration team. Image number 4 is before, and image number 5 is after the improvements took place. Obviously, they were both, all the surveys were done with the same drone. Legal considerations. This is obviously a bit of background about anyone that would like to explore more about the considerations before using the drone. The use of drones in UK airspace is regulated from the Civil Aviation Authority under national and European regulations. CAP 722 refers to unmanned aircraft system operations in UK airspace. It's guidance and policy, which highlights the safety requirements that have to be met in terms of airworthiness and/or operational standards before a drone is allowed to operate in the UK. The Air Navigation Order 2016 is a set of conditions which are included in various articles of the order, which detail the specific requirements for the safe flight of small unmanned aircraft. Also, Data Protection Act 2018 and Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act, or otherwise for short as known as RTPI 2000, regulate all data gathered from the use of drones. The 2 links below obviously is a link to these legislations. Currently, as of 1st of October this year, 2020, in UK there are only 24 local authorities that are registered with the Civil Aviation Authority as commercial drone operators. However, it is not known how many of them use their drones for planning enforcement purposes. If any of you work for the local authorities on this slide that did not know that your authority had a drone, now you do know. Obviously, there's 24 in total. The number to the right of the local authority's name is the license reference number, or the license number registered with the Civil Aviation Authority. This information is extracted from a very lengthy registration document whose link is at the bottom of the page, accessible at the Civil Aviation Authority. And that leads me to the final slide and open it up to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much indeed, Ervin. That's I'm sure that I can see questions already coming in. So if anybody does want to ask a question, please type it in, but don't swamp me just at the moment. I'm going to start off actually with a question from Mark Lane, because hang on, which for some reason I can't, I've already looked at it once, so I can, oh, I see, yep, right, I've got it, sorry everybody, yeah. I'm going to start off, Evan, with a question about surveillance really, and he asked a question, Mark Lane, how you observe the regulation of an Investigatory Powers Act, and when, or if you have ever been challenged on using the drone for covert surveillance. And this is certainly something that we talked about a lot yesterday in our session, where we were talking about surveillance and whether we're on tricky ground, you know, about this, and if you perhaps yourself or your authority has ever been challenged on this by anybody for the use of the drone. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. With regards to surveillance, surveillance basically is aimed at a particular property or particular individuals if you wish to identify their activity. Now, local authorities don't really need to be involved in this type of activity. This activity is mostly associated with law enforcement agencies, i.e. the police. If the local authority ever finds itself in a situation whereby this type of surveillance is required, then it is best to leave that for the law enforcement agency, the local policing teams. We in Sandwell have never been required to be involved in any surveillance because it's not really necessary or part of the remit for our service area or for any other service areas within the council. Again, I can speak only for the local police force in our region, which is West Midlands Police. They've got a large team of drone operators, which are all police officers, and obviously any surveillance that is required for their intended purposes is well and duly covered under the Regulatory of Investigatory Powers Act. Local authorities don't need to use this power at all. It's just data protection and how we obtain and how we secure this information that we need to be more concerned about rather than direct surveillance on individuals.
Well, thank you. Sally Hames also asks the same sort of question about when is it considered to be overt or covert surveillance. I think you've probably answered that, haven't you? You've told us, I think.
Yeah, obviously covert would be when you aim the survey on an individual property or an individual resident within the area that is subject to any investigation. And again, before the local authority can even go there, usually this is done in association with the council's legal team as well as any antisocial behavior teams within the local authority area. Quite frankly, local councils do not need to be involved in this type of operation because the law enforcement agency, the police, will cover that very well.
Okay, right, I'm getting a bit swamped now with these questions. So I'm going to read out Robert Latham's question to you because it's too long to summarize. Can I just make a plea to all of you, if you're writing a question, if you could make it quite brief and basic so that we can understand it and it can be easily read and in our time. Okay, so this is Robert Latham's question to you, Ervin. What is the position where a complainant provides drone footage in support of a complaint that has been obtained without the landowner's consent or without the appropriate commercial licensing in place? Have they committed a criminal offence, and where does this leave the enforcement officer viewing the footage should they report the infraction? That's a very interesting question.
It is, yes. With regards to the regulations surrounding the use of drones, anyone flying a drone over 250 grams in weight must be registered with the Civil Aviation Authority as a drone operator, not necessarily for commercial operations. Loads of people own a drone for their own entertainment, for their own enjoyment of using the drone, which is a wonderful new technology. Loads of them fly them from their back gardens, and they may accidentally come across unauthorized development. Now, with the use of drones, the pilot that is flying the drone for financial gain or for commercial purposes, then obviously it must be registered with the Civil Aviation Authority. Any resident that provides the local authority with any evidence of unauthorized development, I don't think it'll be an offence for the local authority or the planning enforcement officer to actually observe or watch what they're being provided with. Any legality in terms of the footage or the images obtained by the concerned resident, it's something that the resident would have to consider before they use a drone for that purpose. But from my point of view as a drone operator, but also as a planning enforcement officer, if a resident comes forward and says, Ervin, this is the footage I've obtained, or this is the image that I obtained from one of the properties few doors further down from me as having built an unauthorized development, I would happily look into that, and then I'll use that to then go to the next step, as in establishing direct contact with the site in question or with the owners of the property to establish if there's a planning breach indeed. So that will be probably an excuse for us to then create an enforcement case and dwell further into that allegation of unauthorized development or untidy land, which might be the case.
I think that our people here in the conference, I think that they're worried about whether or not that would be legal for you to do that. Would it hold up in court, for example, if the only reason you knew about this was from unauthorized use of a drone by somebody else? And actually Neil Harris asks a pretty similar question, and he also wonders if you've got any examples. You don't need to name the place or the person or anything, but maybe you've got some examples you could tell us where this has happened. Someone made a complaint because they've seen it from a drone.
With regards to the use of drones, the use of drone is purely to establish if development has taken place. The drone is not going to give you three-dimensional information about the unauthorized development in question and whether it is over the permitted development rights or whether it needs planning permission. That'll be the first step towards an investigation to find out if a planning breach has been committed. We as planning enforcement officers, I don't think we need to be concerned with the legalities of someone providing an image obtained from a drone showing an alleged planning breach as an alleged unauthorized development. I will then use that image to identify where the development has taken place and then establish direct contact with the owner or the occupier of the property in question and then start the investigation from there. We can, if the owner or the occupier is then making it difficult to obtain or to secure a site visit, then obviously we as planning enforcement officers also have powers of entry that we can utilize, so we don't have to heavily rely on the use of a drone footage or a drone image. That is purely to tell us where development has taken place. The rest will be what we do on a daily basis to investigate any allegations of planning breaches. I hope it makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does make sense. Thank you. And Mark Lane, who also makes another suggestion, actually, or suggests that a drone might be used for unauthorized waste transfer site where something illegal is happening. To confirm, the drone would be used to confirm maybe somebody else's drone. So have you had any experience of that, just to help other people out, other enforcement officers here?
We have not had such a need in Sandwell, but the drone that we've got in Sandwell is managed and purchased by the environmental protection team, which coincidentally also manages all unauthorized traveller encampments in Sandwell Borough area. So and they also deal with environmental crime and fly tipping. So the purpose of the drone is to be used for such purposes as well, as long as we have the permission of the landlord. And if the drone is to be used to survey a site that is accumulating waste and then sorting it, we don't necessarily need to fly the drone over the site or over the land which is owned privately. We can fly the drone from the highway. The highway is owned by the local authority. The permission is straight there. You just need to notify the highways of this intention. You fly the drone. You can go up to 120 meters or 450 feet in height, which will give you plenty of view to observe exactly what is going on the land in question. So the drones will be purely just to open up sort of the floodgates to an investigation to identify what could potentially be going on a particular site, and then we'll have to carry on with the rest of our routine investigation process.
Okay, there's a couple of sort of technical questions coming in. Like one of them is that at the moment there are only 24 authorities you've told us about who have licenses. So let me see who's asking this question. Ross Parker is asking whether or not the authorities that have got them, are you aware that they might be selling their services almost, or selling their services really to other ones? And I suppose associated with that question is the very first question that we got from David Rennie, which was, he wonders what the cost of training is and the cost of the license and the cost of the drone and insurance, etc., to the authority. Have you any idea about that? So two bits there. Do you think authorities sell their services to adjacent or local other authorities? And how much does it cost the authority to do this? You know, is it worth the investment?
In my personal humble opinion, I think that investing in a drone is absolutely a wonderful equipment or another additional power that we can use as local authorities, not just for planning enforcement purposes, but for any other enforcement purposes within the local authorities' remit. In terms of the service being provided to the adjoining or neighboring local authorities, in Sandwell, we do not do that because we've got a limited amount of pilots that can actually fly the drone. I'm the main drone pilot in Sandwell. There's another 4, but they have not been able to utilize their skills. If you move on to that, then you'd be moving towards a proper commercial drone operation, whereby you just have a dedicated team of drone pilots that utilize their skills as and when necessary, and then they charge the neighboring local authorities should a request be received. In terms of the initial cost, when we did the training, which was in 2018, I was told the cost of the training for each member of the council was about near enough £1,500, but that included additional work for the preparation of the operations manual that local authorities need to have. And now you can find plenty of authorized testing centers that can charge anything between, well, as little as £400 or £500 to be qualified as a drone operator. As I mentioned in my presentation, in my slides, to then purchase a drone, you can start from the cheapest one, which is near enough £1,000. But then obviously, if you need to have additional batteries, which is what we have on the drone that we have in Sandwell, you'd be looking near enough £2,000, which is not a significant amount of money. In Sandwell, before we had the unfortunate situation with COVID-19 pandemic, I prepared a business case to see if we could actually invest in a bigger drone with better capabilities. Obviously, the drone, it's not to be used just by planning. You can use it within housing departments, local authorities and their housing teams. They spend large amounts of money in improving the housing stock. They do home surveys, and then you can do the energy performance certificates by simply attaching a thermal imaging camera on the drone. All this can prove very, very extremely beneficial for the local authority, because in terms of the money spent and what you can get out of it, the ratio would be unimaginable in terms of the benefits for the local authority.
There's somebody here, Richard Stott, says that he owns a license already to operate a drone, but not not via the council, so like you have got. And he's trying to persuade his legal team to allow him to use his personal drone, I think that's what you're saying, Richard, for council use. and he seems to be wondering if you've heard of that being possible elsewhere, or do you know? Have you got any ideas, suggestions for him?
Obviously, for the local authority to be utilizing such information, the drone has to be registered under the council's name and have their own registered drone pilots and have their own operations manual. If I had my own drone, and I was more than happy to provide my service to the local authority, questions will be raised about the legality of the drone being used and the council's name being used, that it's utilizing other drone operator service. I know, as an example, if in Sandwell, the surveyors team, they needed a survey on the town hall in one of the towns in Sandwell, and they ended up commissioning a private company, a drone operator, and they paid £1,200 for the simple survey. So from my personal point of view, I wouldn't be comfortable to use my drone under my license and under my registration for the purpose of the local authority, because you can leave yourself open to any sort of negative criticism.
I think somebody here, Steve Ball, he suggests that training costs are approximately £840 per person, and I think he said that his authority is training people up at the moment. I'm not sure where he's from, but maybe Steve, you'd like to tell us where you're from for information. Okay, I think, what else people are writing here? Sorry about this, folks. Okay, well, Sally Hames would like you. I think Sally Hames is suggesting that we're promoting the use of drones, perhaps a little too much. And I think she perhaps wants to know a little bit more about the legalities of it. So maybe if people could ask those kind of questions. I mean, I'm not sure that we are doing that, Sally, to be honest with you. I think that we're hearing a lot of examples of where drones can be used and how they can be used legally, who can use them, whether you've got license or not. So I'm quite happy with the way things are going at the moment. How about then from Anaran Parry, sorry, where a breach of planning control is established and the site is substantial, is it permissible to use a drone to establish the extent of the breach, for example, where there is significant ongoing engineering works?
Of course, that would be a prime example as to where the drone can be used to sort of enable the local authority or the planning enforcement officers to establish exactly the extent of any planning breaches. And since the site might be quite substantial in area, rather than getting the officer on foot and trying to observe little patches here, there and everywhere, the use of drone will give you that perfect bird eye view to see exactly where any development is taking place. And then you can just focus your attention straight on those particular places. And then obviously, before you get there, part of the investigation process would be to liaise with the landowner to inspect those parts that might be subject to any unauthorized development. If you get no satisfaction, and then obviously we can either go down the route of securing a warrant under the power of entry, or you can notify the landlord or the owner that you intend to carry out a drone survey for the purpose of securing information about any unauthorized developments. I don't think there's anything wrong with the local authority actually doing that.
So I suppose I could just ask, what might trigger the use of the drone? I mean, is this something that you're using on a daily basis? Or so say, for example, I think my neighbour's doing something wrong and you can't see it from the road at all. Could I ask the authority to put up a drone to have a look? Would it be, or would it be in your, would it be the complainant's idea, or would it be yours? Or are you out every day with your drone looking round?
My view on this would be, I believe, similar to any other qualified drone pilot, whether working in planning enforcement or any other areas. If there is another means on how you can secure this information, then I would, for example, just a simple door knock and just asking the owner or the occupier that you are investigating. We have received this complaint about an alleged planning breach. Part of our investigation is to establish if a planning breach has actually taken place. If they cooperate, there's absolutely no need for the use of the drone. On the other hand, you may not get access through to the alleged property about the planning breach. You may get access through the complainant's property, who might be the neighbor next door. So that'll be sufficient for us as planning enforcement officers to then establish, is that a potential planning breach, and do you need to escalate it, as in get in touch with the owner to get access to their property. And then if they give you full access to the property and you take the measurements and you survey the site whether a breach has taken place, there is absolutely no need for the use of drone. We in Sandwell, even if we receive requests for anyone saying, oh, by the way, I think my neighbor has done something that may need permission, can you fly a drone because I know that you've got a drone? My first response would be, there is absolutely no need for the drone until we try and liaise with the owner, the occupier. If that fails, then we move on to the power of entry. If that then becomes quite problematic, then you need to explore the opportunity. What are you going to achieve from the use of drone that you cannot achieve by any other means? But the drone is always there as an option.
So you mentioned before, Neil Harris raises the question again, that you have to get special permission to fly over highways, for example. So how do you obtain the necessary permissions to fly over private land?
If it is over land that is owned privately, you'd need to make contact with the landowner and to explain the purpose of the drone inspection. And obviously you need to provide a named individual and a telephone number that the landlord can get in touch with and ask any further questions if he or she wishes to. Obviously, if there is a planning breach, then you can justify that. Obviously, that is for the purpose of identifying in a safest way possible without causing any harm or any injury to officers by entering the site, whether a planning breach has taken place. Again, as I said, you can under the regulations for the drone, and obviously my colleague that is also a drone operator in his private life would confirm this. You can the highway belongs to the local authority. You notify the local authority and that relevant department that you need to do this survey, and then obviously within the 30-meter bubble you can fly the drone without any complications at all, straight on a vertical straight line. It'll be amazing how much information you can actually capture from a 30 or 50 meter distance from the ground level. And if you have a drone that is capable of any zooming capabilities, you'd be able to zoom in right in from quite a distance without even needing to fly over the land that is privately owned. All I can say is the opportunities are endless with the use of the drone, but we all need to be mindful and careful in how we actually use the drones without letting ourselves to any negative criticism or any negative publicity.
Well, Laura White is asking just sort of that question really, whether if you attempt to obtain entry onto private land that you can't see from the road or anywhere else, whether or not the threat of using the drone will persuade a reluctant landowner to allow you to have a look at the land. Maybe it can be used as a threat. Is that right?
Of course, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with the local authority being open and transparent with the alleged perpetrator of a planning breach by notifying them of the steps that we intend to undertake to identify and establish if a planning breach has taken place. It can be used. It's not a threat. It's just explaining the powers at the council's disposal, and obviously the council that is in possession of a drone will have fully qualified drone pilots that will know what they're doing. So yeah, there's absolutely nothing wrong with mentioning that.
I think you said something. I think you said something before that might worry some people a little bit, which is about the zoom capability of a drone. And I imagine you could, as an enforcement officer, maybe get yourself into trouble with this. I don't know. I'm just speculating, really. I imagine it might be something that you have to be wary of.
With regards to the zoom, that was in to try and give a scenario to, or an answer for the question that what if you don't get a permission from the landowner? If you don't, and it was purely for that purpose, really, to demonstrate that you don't necessarily need the permission from the landowner. You can go from the highway, from the pavement, flying up 120 meters, which is quite a substantial distance. And with the zooming capability, you are not using the zooming capability of the drone to observe or to survey a particular individual for any covert or overt surveillance. It's not surveillance, it's pure, you're not there to capture any footages. You're there purely to obtain an image, to show exactly where things are, and then you can use it to then contrast and compare whether a planning breach may have taken place.
Okay, so the question, I think one question we really would like to know about is whether or not you have prosecuted. I'm just saying, I know someone's asked this question. I don't want to leave anybody out. Oh, here we go. I think it's, yes, Jamie Scott. You've asked, Jamie, whether or not you've actually prosecuted anybody entirely with the use of drone footage.
In Sandwell, we have not resorted to using any images obtained by the use of drone for any prosecution purposes, because, as I said, we have been successful so far in terms of getting the full understanding and the cooperation of the alleged perpetrators of any planning breaches. The only time that the drone was used for prosecution purposes was actually on the images that I shown earlier about the entirety property used in cooperation or in association with the work by the building control team as a dangerous structure. That was what they actually had to use to use it for their prosecution purposes, but not for planning enforcement. I did mention in my presentation that the only times that we had to use the drone for planning enforcement purposes was for 2 untidy land cases that coincidentally turned to be dangerous structures as well. So it was for planning purposes, planning enforcement, as well as for building control purposes. But we never resorted to taking those any further in terms of prosecution.
So, I mean, one question that's popping up as well is what might happen in the future. So Neil Harris, again, is asking about requirements in law to keep drone footage for any particular length of time. And I just wondered if that is yet in the law, if that's something that you have to do.
That will certainly be covered under the Data Protection Act, because we become under the data protection is called subject access data user. So obviously we have to comply with the use of data and how we actually store that information. I can speak from my own personal experience. All the drone surveys that I've carried out, I've got a separate electronic folder in my drive. I save all the footage and all the images on those particular folders, and I keep them there. And they will be there for as long as I continue to work with Sandwell. Then they will inherit them, because I know that it is my responsibility as a responsible drone operator, qualified drone operator, to safeguard the use of the drone, but also to protect myself and my local authority from any inquiries or from any claims of any wrongdoing. So yes, it'll be right and proper to store such information, or as long as you need to. Obviously, data protection will be what we need to be observing as to how long we need to store the data for.
I suppose one situation that might arise that Debbie Threlfall has just raised is that in her authority they've used a private drone operator. So they must have established that that person had the right permissions, etc., to look at tree removal. And I suppose one of the questions might be whether or not that person got the correct permissions. Could you rely on that? And then whether or not that person gives you the drone footage, or whether they keep the drone footage. I suppose there are lots of issues can come up around this use of drones that we are trying to delve into at the moment.
When local authorities find themselves commissioning private drone operators, the first thing that we need to do as local authorities is identify if they're actually registered with the Civil Aviation Authority. They should produce a copy of their liability insurance and also a copy of their registration, which is the license registration number with the Civil Aviation Authority. Once you have established these two crucial elements, then in terms of the data, the way most drone operators, private drone operators operate, is they will provide you then with all the footage and all the images that they capture for this purpose. In terms of any rights over that material, I'm not quite sure whether they delete everything or whether they keep something in case the local authority comes back with any further inquiries, or someone makes a complaint against the drone operator and say, by the way, on such and such date, you flew the drone and this is what you did, and I'm challenging your actions. So yeah, any wise drone operator will store any information for, well, I would say for at least 5 years, really, because you never know.
Yes, quite. And then David Jones from Telford and Wrekin says that in his authority, they are awaiting a court case, a date at the moment, to show non-compliance with something. What was it then? Something with a large site area to show non-compliance. When I'm reading these things, I'm thinking this is such a new area really for enforcement officers. It might be quite good if you could all have some kind of platform where you could exchange ideas and you know, load up some experiences of how and when drones can be used, when they're challenged, when you've been challenged, when I think it might be something that is very interesting. I'm sure that Neil Harris is waiting in the wings to write an article about it, because he likes to write. He's an academic who writes articles about enforcement.
Right. I'll certainly be more than happy to be contacted by anyone that may have any inquiries about the use of drones. Again, I'm not a guru in terms of the use of drones, but I think and I believe I know enough on how to use the drone for the purposes of planning enforcement. Again, there's nothing wrong with asking and finding out, so at least then you can make an informed decision. But in terms of enforcement, again, using the drone in the correct manner and in the safest manner without any accidents, hopefully, there's absolutely nothing wrong. It's obviously the Civil Aviation Authority regulates everything, and every local authority that decides or is in possession of a drone and has its own qualified drone pilots will make absolutely certain that everything is done as it should be, because no local authority wants themselves or their names to be tainted by any wrongdoing. But I'm happy to be contacted if I can help.
Well, thank you very much. Right, I'm going to read another technical question. I have to read it because it's a little bit beyond my own technical capabilities. From Richard Stott at Think at Bath and North East Somerset Council. With the change to drone laws coming into effect in 2021, are you looking to upgrade to the GVC, or do you think the A2 C of C would be sufficient for survey purposes for enforcement? I'm just laughing because I don't understand the question, but I'm sure you do, Ervin. So if you could help Richard out here.
Well, obviously, Richard must be quite well aware of the points that he's referring to. The most recent change in legislation for the use of drones obviously stemmed from the wrongful use of the drones at Gatwick Airport, whereby they disrupted international flights at the airport. The new legislation is that any drone that is over 250 grams, without the fuel cell, any fuel cells, must be registered with the Civil Aviation Authority. If you intend to use the drone for commercial purposes, and commercial purposes would be anything for any financial gain or for the purpose of selling it on to someone else, then obviously you need to be registered and to be qualified as a drone operator through those privately owned assessment centers. Now, any legislation as and when it comes in 2021, every drone operator will be expected to observe them and abide by them. In Sandwell, again, we only have one drone, but I'll give you something else to compare it with. West Midlands Police has a team of, I believe, 20 odd police officers that are all qualified as drone pilots, and they have a fleet of drones. Obviously, they use it for their intended purposes. They use much bigger and better drones than the one that we have. But in terms of the responsibility for observing any regulations will lie with the local authority and the drone operators. So yeah, obviously those particular changes will be something to look forward to and see how we can actually apply those in any further drone surveys we may do in Sandwell.
Yeah, well, Debbie Threlfall, who asked the question about using a private drone operator, just adds here, just to let us know, I don't know which authority she's from, but that they paid £250 to a private drone operator and made sure that they did have all the correct certificates. So just making sure everything's legal. Yes. Absolutely. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions. Anybody? I think we're doing quite well flying through these ones. They're quite technical, the questions, and I welcome that bit really, because of course you're using them, all of you, and I think it's great that we're having this discussion actually, because certainly opening our eyes just to a completely new approach to enforcement. I mean, can I ask you, Ervin, do you think it's the future? Do you think eventually every local authority will be able to conduct their enforcement activity in this way? And does it save on resources? I mean, it's a well-known fact that enforcement is an under-resourced activity. It's very well known that there's never enough enforcement officers, and this may help a bit towards that lack of resource. So do you see that it is the future?
I absolutely think that the use of drones is the future, and also it provides fantastic opportunities for the local authorities to actually secure that additional information in terms of any planning breaches. As examples, in terms of the use of the drone in local authorities can be so broad, it's unbelievable. I'll give you an example within Sandwell again. We had a parade of shops in a busy neighborhood, and it was a three-story building, and the parade of shops had about 50 shops in total, and there was a complaint about parts of the coping stones being loose and being dangerous, and the building control manager made an assessment in terms of whether they could use a cherry picker or to use scaffolding, and he found out that just to use that to begin with would have been at least £5,000 just to use a cherry picker. In terms of using the drone, it took us one morning on a Saturday to try and doing it quite early in the morning to minimize the disruption to any of the activities within the shops. And we identified with pinpoint accuracy as to where the problem was, and then the building control then organized for that work to be carried out on that particular location on the roof that needed additional work, where some loose debris was actually about to fall off from the third story. Another example was the survey of a town hall that our surveyors team did, and they contracted or commissioned a private drone operator at the cost of £1,200. We had another request for the survey of the highway by our planning regeneration team. Again, they would have paid privately at least £1,200 to secure this progress update. From a housing point of view, local authorities, they do periodical surveys on their housing stock, being low-rise and high-rise. To get someone privately, you'd be looking drone operators. They usually charge at least £200 to £250 per hour. So you do the maths when you try and total it all up throughout the year, and for so many different service areas that can benefit from the use of the drone, the cost benefits would be amazing for every local authority.
I think that people are suggesting that Steve Ball and actually Neil Harris again have both said that using drones for aerial surveys could be, obviously will be, is currently being used for aerial surveys, especially now when site visits are limited because of the COVID situation. And so Steve Ball from his authority says that drones have been used for planning committee presentations on a large site.
There you go.
Because site visits, I suppose, as well for councillors are no longer possible.
Yeah.
So wider use. So in fact, maybe there's an even wider use. Maybe drones will have a much greater application for aerial surveys and site visits.
They do. They are widely used in the private sector. Just by doing a quick search on the Civil Aviation Authority's register of drone operators, you'll be amazed to see how many individuals are actually providing their services for aerial surveys, aerial photography, roof surveys, power line surveys. So it's amazing how many people have taken up this opportunity. And certainly with the use of drones by any local authority, the risk with that is that you end up having 1 or 2 pilots and then have so many service areas requiring this service, special service, then you end up taking these officers away from their main role. So perhaps it's better for the local authorities to carefully work out how they want to run such an operation without disrupting the part of the service that the operators are providing for their own teams. And obviously the drone operators, they need to have that support and network with other drone operators, not just within their local authority, but also wider. And that is certainly my intention in the future, to explore these local authorities that do have a drone and to find out if any of them are using them for plan enforcement purposes, and create a little network of drone operators across local authority. And it's amazing how much you can actually benefit just from sharing experience and good practices and bad practices amongst one another.
And so the final question really is come from Lihan Ibrahim, which is suggesting that a drone can be used, I suppose, for more detailed survey, and we all know that Google Earth, of course, is also being used a lot. But I guess you get more detailed pictures from a drone, more up to date as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's absolutely correct. Yes.
Right, everybody. Well, I think we've come to the end now. We've had an hour, and this has been quite technical. So I've learned a hell of a lot, which is really good. And thank you all very much indeed for coming. There's been a good attendance at this. And I would like to thank as well the RTPI for organising this webinar or seminar, and especially to Jenny Devine and Isabella Crabb, who've been present in the background, making sure everything goes well, and done an enormous amount of organisation for this, because it's not easy to set up something like this. So thank you very much to them. And finally, can I thank Ervin for what really has been a most fascinating and truly informative discussion today, with good questions and a great presentation. So thank you very much, Ervin. So I say goodbye to you all now. Thanks very much for coming. Thanks a lot. Cheerio. Bye-bye.